Today I will refute Carl's main claim that the death penalty is an ineffective capital punishment. Her first secondary claim was wrongful convictions. The wrongful convictions my opponent provided is misidentification, invalidated or improper forensics, false confessions, admissions, and government misconduct. An example my opponent provided was the case in Illinois, which is problematic. She was not specific whether the prisoner was innocent or still in jail due to DNA improper forensic. To reduce the number of wrongful convictions, we could do mandatory recordings of an entire interrogation, confession examination, including defense lawyering and resources for public defense and ensuring the proper training and oversight of all defense lawyers to prevent wrongful convictions. To prevent government misconduct for all actors in the criminal justice system who knowingly or directly helps to convict the innocent suffers real consequences. To strengthen forensic science, creating an independent federal forensic science identity that will stimulate research to establish the extent of the validity and reliability of forensic science disciplines and setting enforcement standards to ensure the proper application of forensic evidence in courts. When an individual is sentenced to an execution, it is because sufficient evidence is provided to back up a serious crime they have committed. Our government will not allow someone to be executed for a minor crime they can serve as time for. To be eligible for a death penalty, the defendant crimes must have fallen under the following factors. The murder was especially heinous, atrocious, cruel, or depraved. The capital offense was in a series of intentional killings committed by the defendant. The murder was committed in a cold, calculated manner with pretense of moral or legal jurisdiction. The defendant was engaged in terrorism. The victim was killed because of his, her race, gender, color, religion, nationality, or sexual orientation. The murder was committed for a pecuniary gain. The defendant takes a hostage or uses a human shield. The murder was in context with illegal drug trade or human trafficking. The question we must ask ourselves is should we allow these ruthless killers to live, or should we just find a way for them never to kill again? Death penalty is a decision that is appropriate under certain circumstances. I have a quote here by Mike Huckabee, former governor of Arkansas. I believe there is a place for death penalty. Some crimes are so heinous, so horrible that only the response that we, as a civilized nation, have for most uncivil action is not only to try to deter that person from ever committing that crime again, but also as a warning to others that some crimes truly are beyond any other capacity for us to face. My opponent's secondary claim was death penalty fails to deter crime. The online sources my opponent used to prove that death penalty fails to deter crime shows graphs where the crime rate is compared in non-death penalty and death penalty states, and it shows how non-death penalty states have lower crime rates. To prevent murder, our society should use the strongest punishment available to deter murder, and that is the death penalty. If murderers are sentenced to death, then executed potential murderers will think twice before killing for fear of losing their own life. My opponent mentioned how retributions only continue the cycle of violence. On the contrary, this should decrease violence if criminals are aware that if they kill, their life will soon end as well. As far as deterrence, the states that do not have the death penalty have low crime rates simply because there's no need for them to reach such brutal punishment like death penalty. States that have the death penalty are those with high crime rates and are left with no other option but to execute those criminals who reach behavior that cannot be fixed. If murderers are sentenced to death and executed, potential murderers will think twice before killing for fear of losing their own life. Studies regarding deterrence are inconclusive, but it's only because the death penalty is rarely used and it takes years before an execution is actually carried out. Punishments which are swift and sure are the best deterrent. The fact that some states or countries which do not use the death penalty have lower murder rates than jurisdiction, which is not evidence of the failure of deterrence. States with much higher rates but have even higher rates if the death penalty isn't allowed. As retributions for the most cruel and heinous crimes, the ones for which the death penalty is applied, offenders deserve the worst punishment under our system law, and that is the death penalty. Any lesser punishments would undermine the value society places on protecting lives. Robert Macy is another quote. He's from the district attorney of Oklahoma City. He described this concept of the need for retributions in one case in 1991. was a young mother. The mother was rendered helpless and made to watch her baby was executed. The mother was then mutilated and killed. The killer should not lie in some prison with 3 meals a day, clean sheets, cable TV, family visits, and endless appeals for the justice to prevail, and some killers just need to die. Her third secondary claim was financial costs of the country has to face when it comes to the death penalty are too high. My opponent states specific numbers I cannot find on the resources she provided. Besides that, it makes sense and it seems reasonable that our country spends large quantities of money on trials before every case due to high numbers like I came across on several websites. My opponent mentioned how money can be distributed differently instead of so much really going towards the jail system. If death penalty is abolished, abolitionists will turn to eliminate life without parole as well, and will drive the appeal costs higher than death penalty appeals, since there is no execution to end the process of a life without parole prison. The cost for justice does not have to be so high for the execution of murderers. If we only allowed appeals that are relevant improvements once innocent and eliminating the many more that are used really as delaying tax, it would save millions of taxpayer dollars. The last quote I have on pro death penalty is by John McAdams. He says, if we execute murderers and there is in fact no deterrent effect, we have killed a bunch of murderers. If we fail to execute murderers, and doing so would in fact have deterred other murderers. We have a lot of killings of a bunch of innocent victims. I would much rather risk the former. This to me is not a tough call. In conclusion, my opponent's main claim that the death penalty is an effective capital punishment if made under certain circumstances. I'm sorry. In conclusion, my opponent's main claim is that the death penalty is an effective capital punishment if made under certain circumstances. Who have committed severe crimes or should have suffered the consequences to the fullest extent. That's it.
We've got a lot of the same issues that I saw in some of the other speeches. We've got a lot of claims being presented that are not explained, and there needs to be a little bit more contrast. On the first point, I think you're rushing it, and there is some argument about... about whether or not the punishment is appropriate here. This is all a value argument that you're getting into at the end. You don't really discuss whether or not the application is reasonable. You only tell us what the criteria are, and ultimately you're saying that those criteria suggest that they deserve the death penalty, and that's a value claim that's being made on that point. So I'm not sure that that really responds to that first point as clearly as it could. In essence, it's just, there's no challenge to whether or not innocent people are being executed, only that we spend the money to try and mitigate that, which is sort of also an issue that comes up later on. You basically acknowledge that we spending the money is okay because we're trying to protect an interest here. All right, but if there's a consequence of spending that money that is negative, I don't remember that the advocate presented an argument on that. That would be problematic. The deterrence argument is a straightforward claim of fact, and you do have some challenge to the state-by-state comparison, but I don't think you explain it very well. And because you're rushing all that evidence and reading it without giving a clear explanation, it doesn't have the impact that it ought to have. Plus, you end up with that deserving criteria again, which suddenly shifts it to being a value-based argument. I just think that there's way too much reading here and not enough discussion of what the evidence means and how it's contrasted to the position that the advocate's taking. All right, thank you.